In Strive Towards Social Harmony, Engendering Rainbows SMC Private Limited welcomes all participants of the webinar to join in global celebrations of United Nations mark Zero Discrimination Day on March 1st. It was initially launched by UNAIDS and first observed on March 2014 in realization of nexus between stigma, discrimination, inequality, human rights violations, and incidents and response to HIV and AIDS. Later, it transitioned into another avenue for global citizenry to look beyond the polarization of humankind and urges to forego biases based on age, gender, sexuality, nationality, ethnicity, skin color, height, weight, profession, income, race, class, health status, disability, education, beliefs, and so on. The discourse is about spirit of humanity, its diversity, and gazing it all through doctrine of human rights that brings us all together in dignity and collective worth beyond discriminations and injustice. However, inequality persists and prevails all across the globe. Religious affinity, nationality, a race, a caste, class, a sex, or gender identity, and many others within a formal and informal culture of prejudice based on who we are and what we believe in determines human dignity, survival, access to, and control over opportunities. In the context of HIV and AIDS, stigma and discrimination limits key populations and vulnerable groups access to and prevention and response facilities. It includes groups whose marginalization exposes them to abuse and STIs, as women in situations of culturally demarcated gender based hierarchies, LGBTQ communities, and sex workers. Resulting social exclusion influences exercise of rights to decide responsibly, free of coercion, discrimination, and violence on matters related to their sexuality, including sexual and reproductive health. While pondering through cases of disability, though 1 in 10 worldwide are disabled, despite much progress on rights fronts, the disabled still live through harsh reality of being secluded, degraded, and looked as objects of pity, refused job opportunities despite being specially able. While moving on to gender-based discriminations, they influence women access and control over material, financial, human, social, and political resources, while women in conservative cultures, under the wrath of gender-based hierarchy and patriarchy, continue to bear the brunt of customary practices. While sexual harassment is a shared experience and resisted by women action forums all across the globe. Moreover, the world leaders propound global citizenship Discrimination occurring against non nationals, also referred as xenophobia, is still prevalent. Across the world, refugees and asylum seekers find resistance from state and pressure groups, regarded as a crisis, and it is followed by unjust policy measures. As in South Africa, refugees from other African countries came across violent attacks fueled by hate incitement by politicians. In Pakistan, we recently witnessed a sudden shift in state policy with regard to hosting refugees, followed by forced exodus, even backed by much public sentiment against Afghan refugees. While continuing our trust on equality, we find human civilization still confronts racism. It refers to human rights violations because of color, race, ethnicity, descent, including caste or national origin. A caste known as the Dalit in India is regarded untouchable, treated as outcasts and segregated in inferior spaces, merely on the basis of being born in a certain caste despite constitutional amendment. Another significant yet unfulfilled goal of human fraternity is interfaith harmony. Even in multicultural countries as Australia, where state policy asserts equality, yet Islamophobia leads to instances of Muslims facing vilification or Sikhs coming across similar experiences because of being misunderstood as Muslims. While many corners of the human rights pendulum struggle with indoctrination of fanaticism, a religious expression of faith based identity granted a superior stature at the expense of religious freedoms of others. Human Rights Commission of Pakistan reports instances of otherization of Hindus and Christians in South Punjab who are regarded inferior and in addition to suffering from dearth of education and infrastructure facilities bear attempts to being forcibly converted. What has been shared is merely a snapshot of challenges manifesting divide, prejudice, inequality, and injustice that is yet to be dealt with by those who inspire for peaceful coexistence. Now, how do we overcome prejudice and polarization in our drive towards inclusion, social justice, and peaceful coexistence? While human rights activism is geared towards challenging the established status quo, and it all indulges with the potential of governance, infrastructure, locally, nationally, regionally, globally, to mainstream the equality agenda. Moreover, the local and global solidarity within the human rights movements standing against the unjust biases, rights violations, and injustice. Human rights actors harbor momentum, review the impact, and introspect within our ranks. Further, the cultural transformation calls for penetrating established values and practices as root causes of disenfranchisement. It necessitates creating an enabling environment that empower the vulnerable and influences the underlying factors leading to exclusion, subjugation, and disempowerment. While moving on to development actors intervening in infrastructure, microfinance, health, education facilities, skills training, poverty alleviation. Yes, all these interventions are addressing human rights. However, within the social setups where they are situated, the surrounding power relations, dynamics significantly affect the scale of empowerment of the marginalized. UNH states that path that ends AIDS is a rights path, and we must insist that human rights must be at the forefront of all causes. How do we realign the emphasis of development interventions to establish priorities that empower the vulnerable? Human rights based approaches propose and advocate that development practices must not only comply with human rights standards but also take into account the underlying unjust power relations, discriminations, marginalization, and human rights violations that influence the dynamics of intended well being and development consequence. Butterfly symbolizes the campaign ambitions towards overcoming discriminations and a positive transformation of society. The rights conscious changemakers across the world, with celebrations as Zero Discrimination Day and enlightenment of doctrines of human rights, spearhead the discourse and action in favor of application of universality of human rights. Concluding with phrase from UNAIDS: to speak up and prevent discrimination from standing in the ways of achieving ambitions, goals, and dreams. Thank you.